Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wang Ying Glasgow, and I'm the Adult Services Coordinator for the Memphis Public Libraries. Thank you for joining us on this super fantastic Saturday afternoon for our Explore Memphis Summer Reading Finale. Earlier, I talked to Claire, introduced a little bit about Explore Memphis. Explore Memphis is actually our Memphis Public Library's annual summer reading program. It is open and free to people of all ages in the months of June and July. And this year, it is sponsored by, and presented by TVA and Memphis Library Foundation. We cannot do what we do without the help and support of our sponsor and Memphis Library Foundation. This year, it is such an extraordinary year in our summer reading in a pandemic. We are all adapting to life staying at home, working from home, and practice social distancing. And we have learned to overcome our challenges and navigate our new normal by connecting with each other through Zoom, WebEx, and Microsoft Teams, or whatever platform it is. The silver lining of all this is that we are now more resilient and flexible, and we've learned some new skills. Another blessing in disguise is that we're able to invite our guest speaker, Claire Fullerton, who hails from Memphis, Tennessee, and now lives in Malibu, California, to speak to us today virtually. Claire was the guest speaker to our Books and Beyond book club in June for a book talk on her newest book, Little T. She was so dynamic and fascinating, so we wanted to bring her back to share with us her first book, Mourning. This is a 9-time award winner, which includes the literary classics Words on Wings for the Book of the Year Award and the Ippy Award Silver Medal in Regional Fiction. Just very recently, this book also was the winner of the International Book Awards in Women's Fiction category and a winner of the Next Generation National Indie Excellence Awards in Regional Fiction. So wow, what a congratulations, congratulations, what a great achievement.
Thank you.
Claire is also the author of Dancing to an Irish Reel, A Portal in Time, and a novella contributor to the book A Sudden Season. Her latest book is titled Little T. So now let's welcome our featured speaker, author of Mourning Dove, Claire Fullerton.
Thank you so much. What a great intro. And I'll hold up the cover right here. This is Mourning Dove. And yes, it is set on what I say is the genteel side. Oh, thank you. That's a great image. It's set on the genteel side of 1970s Memphis. And I set it in an area in what I consider to be part of the historic district of Memphis. And that's that area around Overton Park and East Parkway. And right where Madison comes to that abrupt end, if you're traveling from the river eastward, and if you're on Madison, all of a sudden Madison stops, and there you are in East Parkway. And that area is actually the area in which I grew up. And I used to walk that area, on foot before, I could drive and my friends could drive, and we would walk to Overton Park. And just Overton Square at the time was a source of endless fascination. It felt very urban to us growing up. And, so that is when I think of Memphis, I think of that area in Memphis. And I think of all of the people that were, around me that lived on the Parkway and how they lived. And when I wrote Mourning Dove, I had an eye towards two things. And one was to portray Memphis from an outsider's vantage point, because that would give them objectivity to be able to tell the story. And so what I did was create siblings, a brother and a sister, who originally came from the lake area in Minnesota. And they had cause, I won't give it away, to move to Memphis when Millie, the narrator, was 10 and her brother Finley was 18 months older. And why Memphis is because their mother Posey was from Memphis and she grew up there. And so when Posey got married to a northerner and they moved up to Minnesota and they started their family there. And again, I won't give it away, but Posey gets it in her head to go home to Memphis and bring her children with her. And she moves into the house that she grew up in, and her mother is still alive, but she's dwindling in Rosewood nursing home. And so Posey brings her mother to the house in Midtown, hires people to tend to her. She cares for her mother very well. And all of a sudden, these two Yankee children are in Memphis, Tennessee, in their mother's world, which they knew very little about prior to moving there. And so it's the story of siblings acclimating themselves to what's essentially Southern culture and specifically Memphis culture. And I wanted to write about the people and how they, their world, how they spoke, what they thought was important, the social connections, where they went, what they did. And it was a lot of concern focused on the idea of appearances in terms of, oh, just everything's just wonderful, everything's just fine, just keep it light and breezy and airy and never confess if there's anything on the underbelly of this, because we don't go there and we don't talk about it. And the idea of what kind of an impact in the long run that might have on these two siblings as they grow up, and everybody around them is saying, what white elephant is in the living room? There's not a white elephant in the living room. Just make it look good. Just keep everything pleasant. So I wanted to explore the impact of that kind of a culture. In the 1970s is where Mourning Dove begins. And then we watch the two siblings grow up and go to college and then some. But the idea being that the South as place and growing up in that region with all of its social mores, what is the impact of that on the formative years, developing psyche of two siblings that come to Memphis as outsiders? And then, of course, as I got into it, I was thinking about, well, of course, to have two siblings cut from the same cloth and share the same history, and yet they turn out differently. And I was saying to myself, now, why does that happen? And how does that happen? And then a little deeper to that question is, all right, well, therefore, is it nature or is it nurture that shapes the man? And I had a really good time writing Mourning Dove because, yes, I do live on the West Coast now, and I've been here for more than 20 years. And so when I was writing about Memphis, it was all a very nostalgic type of exploration for me because, I consider myself extremely blessed to have grown up when I did, where I did, with the people around me, and just the way the whole culture was. I, now that I'm older, and now this is 20, 30 years or more in hindsight, I do tend to romanticize a lot of the South, and what it was like to grow up in Memphis. And I do find myself trying to explain to the friends that I have out here on the West Coast what that was like, because I know they have no frame of reference. And so for me, writing Mourning Dove was a celebration of siblings, certainly, and the family unit and the impact of the family dynamic on what that can have repercussively in the long run. Because, I'm one of those that believes that your formative years are your entire foundation of life. And no matter where you live, that's always going to be your frame of reference. And for me, it still is Memphis to a very large degree. And so I think that in many ways, the writing of Mourning Dove was uh, almost like a love letter to Memphis in terms of, writing about, to me, what were geographic highlights and what were important places for scenes to be set. For instance, Overton Park. For instance, Tom Lee Park down by the river. And for instance, the Chickasaw Gardens area around where Galloway Golf Course is. All of these places were so beautiful and then, and they still are equally as beautiful now. But it really gave me, the writing of this book, the chance to celebrate a lot of what is, memorable about Memphis. And so to set a coming of age and then some story about outsiders being basically thrown into Southern culture, I think that Memphis was the best place I could have possibly set this story. I'm happy to read just a paragraph for you, if that would be helpful to get us started.
Awesome. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. This is just from the beginning of Mourning Dove. The Memphis Finley and I landed in was my mother's Memphis. It was magnolia lined and manicured, black tailed and bow tied. It glittered in illusory gold and tinkled in sing song voices. It was cloistered, segregated, and well appointed, the kind of place where everyone monogrammed their initials on everything from hand towels to silver, because nothing mattered more than one's family and to whom they were connected by lineage that traced back through the fertile fields of the Mississippi Delta. My mother's friends had known each other from birth and coexisted like threads in a fabric. They started families together, sent their children to the same schools they attended, and set up their cloisonne lives in congruent patterns of neat inclusivity. They threw dinner parties in stately homes on tables set with inherited Francis I, polished to a shine by the help. In my mother's Memphis, the conversation stayed pleasant and light over lingering cocktails, and dinner was served by a staff that dropped their own lives in deference to their employers. At an age where many women have seen their crescendo, my mother had only started to come into her beauty. She had the kind of looks that waited in arrested development during her youth, then pounced like a cat around the time she turned 40. With the passage of time, followed by motherhood, her long limbs, flat chest, and slightly recessive chin filled out to capacity. Her face displayed sharp cheekbones that balanced her chin to a perfect heart shape and earned her a self-confidence she wore with sparkling alacrity. But a woman in possession of unique beauty and charm was in a precarious predicament in 1970s Memphis. There was always the dilemma of where to seat her at a dinner party. And without an escort to take the edge off of feminine rivalry, she was easily held in contempt. Let's see. Well, that position was not for her. And my mother, as a master of networking, knew exactly what to do. She acclimated herself to the women in town, joined the garden club and the junior league, lunched at the Memphis Country Club, played bridge, and hosted sip and sees. It wasn't long before the dates started rolling in, though she should have issued a red flag warning that read, "Ladies, hide your husbands. Posey's back in town." So that's an excerpt from Mourning Dove, and it sets up um, the world in which Posey Crossan operates, and that she was a woman that was wily and smart and so charming that you almost overlooked how smart that she was. And in some ways, she was manipulative and self-serving, but it was always for a greater good, because what Posey wanted was to fit in to Memphis society, the society in which she was raised, where all of her friends were, and she wanted to raise her children, Millie and Finley, in that milieu, if you will. And so to have that side of Memphis, and my understanding is Memphis is like many other cities throughout America, that there are different sides to it, different experiences to it. And when I was formulating the idea for Mourning Dove and realizing that this book was going to be Southern fiction classification, I was thinking about, well, the South, as far as Southern fiction goes, we have done the impoverished South. We've done the dirt roads and the pickup trucks and the coon dogs and, hard scrabble lives of the South. Plenty of books have been written with that as the backdrop. But I wasn't aware of many other than one of my all-time favorites, Anne Rivers Siddon's Peachtree Road. Absolutely positively floored me in terms of everything about that epic novel. And, Pat Conroy called Anne Rivers Siddon's Peachtree Road the Gone with the Wind for our generation. And I think he was right because it was so thoroughly realized. And it did talk about a very small, specific, uh, you know, latitude in the Southern culture that you don't really read about that often. And that was the idea that I went into Mourning Dove with was talking about just especially for the women, how beautiful they were and poised and their manners and their charm. And they always looked like $1 million and they never went anywhere without looking like $1 million. And just the whole way of being, kind of reminded me of uh, certain stratas of the English culture. When you get over there and it's all about family and lineage and titles and manners and all of that. In my opinion, the South definitely has that in certain pockets, and the Memphis that I was aware of definitely had that. And so I wanted to talk about that culture because I thought that it was such a great setting for a story. And again, with Mourning Dove, I was saying to myself, all of this is great, but what's the price? At what cost is all of this? And so, yeah, I would love to answer any questions about Mourning Dove if you all have them. I love any type of a question and answer forum.
Okay. Um, Claire, I just finished reading your book yesterday. Thanks for sending me the copy to read, and it was
You're so
wonderful.
welcome. Good.
And and I just found you are such a wonderful storyteller, and you have this ability to describe these things that's a mundane, but you made it so vivid. And the use of language, I was so impressed. I thought I study English language, and I study English, even though English is my second language. I've learned English. I've learned English for so long, but
Yes.
there's so many new words in your book, and I have to check up the dictionary and trying to translate into Chinese so I can learn. But I was so impressed with your use of language like prose, and it just come out so naturally. And two things I'm so impressed. One is the way you describe things just so exquisitely and using wonderful big words to me, and they're just so beautiful. And the other is the way that you create characters. They're just like so vivid in my eyes, like somebody that I know, especially with the setting in Memphis. I can just imagine these characters like Millie or Finley or Posey, just somebody I know from tennis team, from a workplace, just somebody I know. And that was just really impressive to me. And
Thank you so much. Okay, well, I'm going to speak to that because this is just fabulous that you've said this. And do keep in mind that authors, when you are writing your novel, it is a labor of love. It is on your mind all day and into the night for a year or more. Let's just say for a year and a half that you're living with the creation. So it's like an energy that's alive. It's like a mind frame that's alive. And when I wrote Mourning Dove, my consciousness was in Memphis. And I would walk around the house or I would be anywhere and I would grab the first piece of paper and say, I have got to work this line into this book because it just came to me as a Southern expression. And I remember my mother one time saying to me, oh, nonsense. Anyone young is cute. And I remember her delivering the line, well, you're treated the way you allow yourself to be treated. And this type of thing. And I would just write down some of these lines and some of these expressions, thinking, I want to create scenes to be able to deliver that line because it's so telling of the Southern culture. And so for that, in order to set the scene, to be able to deliver the lines, I had to describe where the characters were and what they were talking about that would make it an easy transition for that line to be delivered, because the line would be, again, telling of the culture and the way that the character of Posey thought. What is her mind frame? And so authors are asking themselves, how do I tell the reader who this person was? And the best way I have discovered, Mourning Dove was my third novel that I wrote. And by then I had realized that if you can do it via dialogue, so you're not telling the reader, you're not giving them a lecture, so to speak. You're putting it in dialogue because, if you think about it in life, we come to know characters, our friends, whoever we meet, through what they say, but not only that, but how they say it. I mean, you can learn everything about a person from the way that they speak, from their use of language. And then, to your point about the words, the big words, getting back to an author's world, it's fascinating as an author builds their career, and it's a long game. And essentially, a lot of authors that have books out at the same time, we call it, we're working a book. In other words, we are authors in the world saying, hello world, I have a novel, it exists, and it is this, and this is what it's about. And so the arena that you're working in, social media, certainly during these unique times that we've had since the beginning of 2020, social media has been the forum for every author that I know, including myself, with the release of Little T, that was on May 1st. We're not out at the bookstores in public, at the libraries in public, because all of those avenues right now are doing just what we're doing here, with Zoom. And so you're trying to say, anywhere and everywhere that's available online, I am having fun with this book. I'm excited about this book. I want to share this book with you. And you do that, but the realization for me, and the fact that I am writing was essentially literary fiction, or what is now known as upmarket fiction, and the genre, meaning the bridge between commercial fiction and literary fiction. And so what do I mean by literary fiction? Well, I mean that which pays attention to language and to deep character development. In other words, it's not plot driven. Thrillers are plot driven, and so I think that for me at this point in time, with Mourning Dove out in the world and with Little T out in the world, which is, Little T is pretty much the same genre, in that I really care about the use of language. I want people, if they are not familiar with a word, to love the English language as much as I do. I want them to get their dictionary and look it up, because I think that informing and expanding your vocabulary makes us as people better communicators. And I think it's a lifelong process. And I am one of these people that just is tickled over the use of a word that I don't know. I get all happy about it because it gives me another tool in my arsenal with which to express myself, knowing and feeling as I do that I will never, ever really adequately corner the entire market on what I need to, you know, effectively and efficiently, adequately express what it is I'm trying to express. And that's what a writer's job is. And I think that most of the writers that I know have a sense of this. And those of us that are writing literary fiction in this day and age are promoting our books in a commercial market. And so, because online is online, Zoom and even social media with Instagram and Facebook, LinkedIn, some of these places, the blogs that we have on WordPress, we realize that what we're doing isn't for everybody. And, Goodreads is one of those book sites where everybody is a reader and everybody is sharing news about books and all that. And it's one of the caveats that I've learned, through having now 5 books in the world, is that if you're promoting a book and you're in the general market, with commercial fiction, with thrillers, with everything, that it becomes finding your audience and your audience finding you as well. And, not everybody's going to love, I don't know what this word means. I have to go get a dictionary and look it up. This is a hassle. And so I've gotten both sides of that coin, that on the one hand, there are those that really appreciate my use of language. And on the other, there are those that say, she uses too big of words. As an author, you're going to get it all and you're going to hear it all in terms of what the reader perception is. But for Mourning Dove, I can say by and large, 95% of it has been wonderful, heartwarming feedback. Because, and this is what's interesting about Mourning Dove, is that it's almost as if it's in different genres, and that the Wings on Words, the literary collections, they gave it an award for the book of the year under the category of coming of age and young adult. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? And then other awards were given in the category of literary fiction, and other awards in the category of Southern fiction, regional, Southeast. You mentioned the IPPY Awards. And what that is the Independent Publishers Book Awards. And so every independent publisher, and by independent, I mean these publishing houses that are not with the big 5. They're called independent publishers. So they are not aligned. They're not, in an imprint of the big 5. And there are plenty of independent presses out there. And that's the reason why they have their own awards situation, is because the literary world is recognizing the power of the independent press, and that they're putting a lot of quality books out, into the reading world. And so, yeah, I mean, it's all I can do as an author is be true to how I want to write. And for me, I write the way that I think. And that reading some of the books that I have out, once you meet me and we start talking, the average person says to themselves, oh, I can see why this book is written this way. That's how Clair talks. And I've found that in terms of a writer finding their voice, how do you find your voice? And I never looked for it. just started talking when, in terms of writing. And I'm not one of these authors that, ever went for a degree in journalism or, took writing classes and all of that. Because for me, I didn't want to be squelched in terms of my own voice and my own way of turning a phrase. And so, I can definitely say that thus far, the best thing about the career I have enjoyed thus far is that I never compromised with anything with regard to the way I wanted to tell a story. And I just couldn't be more pleased that people understand what I'm writing. There's a part of me that's just infinitely grateful that Mourning Dove and Little T and the Irish book you mentioned earlier, Dancing to an Irish Reel, that those stories that I wanted to tell in the voice that I wanted to tell them, um, I couldn't be more pleased to hear anybody say, "Oh, I understand what you were saying in this book," So yeah, that was a wonderful comment that you made, and I couldn't be more pleased to hear you say that.
Miss Fullerton, may we see your face?
Can you not see me?
We see this book.
Okay.
Oh, good. Now, okay.
You can see me?
Yeah, now we can.
Okay,
I
Joanne.
can't see you, but that's okay.
Joanne, do you want to ask that question? I saw a question by Joanne. She was asking.
I was asking a question, Miss Fullerton. I want to know, why did you name the book Mourning Dove? And also, I want to know, once the character Posey came back to Memphis to live with her kids, did she pick up with her friends that she left behind in Memphis, or what?
Perfect question. And yes, Posey exactly picked up where she left off. And that was her full intention. And that is exactly what she did. And she wanted to immediately reacclimate herself to, the strata of society in which she had left behind. And what was the first part of that question?
Why did you name it Mourning Dove?
Mourning Dove. Yeah, I think that the Mourning Dove, if you listen to the bird and that lamenting, coo, 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 coo. Well, in truth, in the house and the environment in which I grew up in Memphis, that I heard that cooing sound often, usually in the mornings. And I do love a good bird song. And there's something very forlorn and searching and seeking and kind of mournful about the sound of the mourning dove. It's also a beautiful bird. And we know that birds are winged creatures. And winged creatures tend to be, in mythology, messengers. They have a message to deliver. And it's usually a message to deliver to the spirit. It's of the spirit, it's to the spirit. And I liked the idea of that image. And I think that in terms of mourning dove, that if you think about it, it's sad. It's a sad bird song, but it's also really hauntingly beautiful. And so in telling Mourning Dove the story, it is a story that happened in the past. And Millie Crossan is the narrator, and she's telling it in the first person. And when all of us are telling stories to our friends, and we talk about our past, there is a sense of sort of waxing nostalgia that comes into play. And we tend to look at the good side of things. In telling a story, we seek to tell it well. And we want to show that side of a story that is memorable and is beautiful and that is resonant. And so it was all of these things that I knew that in the beginning of Mourning Dove, when Millie, the narrator, was talking about waking up and hearing the sound of the mourning dove and how her brother Finley, who had a strange thing with birds, he could name birds. He could be in the woods and he could identify birds, and he just had an interest in it and an aptitude, and he could also mimic the cry of the mourning dove. And so once I put that in the beginning of the book, that was one of the many things that made Millie's brother Finley such an exceptional human being. Was he had like a steel trap mind, photographic memory, was an academic achiever as well as a musician. He played the guitar incredibly well, and everything that Finley set his sights to, he excelled in. And he was just one of those people that anything he decided to pursue, he would eventually master. He was one of those kind of fascinating characters. And so when I had mentioned in Mourning Dove that Finley could mimic the cry of the mourning dove, I knew that I had an image, and I decided to make it eponymous. And what we mean by making it eponymous is if it's the title of the book and there's an image that is exemplary of the title of the book, these two things can work together to parlay an image and a feeling. So it operates on a couple of different levels. And that's what I like as a writer is, because you all, there are so many different layers and different choices to be made for someone like me who's an author that wants to deliver to the readers a story, a deep one that's gonna resonate. I want to, as an author, I want to give the readers an entire experience. I want to create a world. I want to create characters that you feel, if you can't identify with them, I want you to feel like you know them. You know exactly who these people are, and and give you an entire experience. And in this case, Mourning Dove's case, set it in 1970s Memphis. I'm going to tell you exactly how it was. And in order to do that, you have to address layers upon layers upon layers of what it is that makes Memphis Memphis, and what it is that makes these characters be who they are, become who they are, be who they are, and interact the way that they do. It's because of the region, and so all of it. So summarily, the title of Mourning Dove is eponymous for a reason. For all of those, lonesome, forlorn, longing, searching ways of experiencing a coming of age and then some. When we tell the story of our lives, we tell it in hindsight and nostalgically. And so the title of Mourning Dove, for me, there was never another option. That I arrived at that probably less than a third of the way through the story. That I worked with it as a title, knowing that was going to be it.
Thank you. Thank you.
So,
Great.
Claire, this is Wang Ying again. I have one question. You were talking about this books when you write it, it's relatable and you can identify. I myself can identify very well that one trip that the Millie and the Finley went from Memphis to Charlottesville, Virginia, and
Yes.
the way that you described. I mean, I have done this trip not just from Memphis to Charlottesville, but from Memphis to Cookville so many times about the music highway, about everything that you write is totally identifiable because we took our son to go to UVA for a college visit.
Really?
Yes. So the whole chapter, I mean, that whole chapter was just like, it could be my story, you know? It's just the whole, and sometimes when we were studying about Reader's Advisory, we say some books bring you back home, feel nostalgic. Other books take you away to a faraway place. But this book, I mean, in many levels, talk about Memphis that we are familiar with, and then talk about this trip. It's just so much, feels familiarity and identifiable.
And that's a wonderful drive from Memphis, Tennessee to Charlottesville, Virginia. And when you start, for me, the closer you get to the Blue Ridge Mountains, because it starts getting hilly, rolling, beautiful. It's just breathtaking. I love the state of Virginia. And I had a brother that went to the University of Virginia all 4 years. And so that's how I knew about Charlottesville. But yeah, that's the scene when they find the dog, which I thought was, how you handle finding a dog, a stray dog, and how you take care of it will tell people who you are. So there were little devices that I put in that one trip that they took. And for those of you that have not read Mourning Dove, and I hope you do, oh, Emily, have we said that it's going to be free, Mourning Dove on ebook yet?
Yes, good. Go
And,
ahead and tell people about how
okay,
to
and then I'll
access.
get back to the trip to Charlottesville.
Mhm.
My publisher let me know at the end of the day yesterday that Mourning Dove is going to be free Amazon Kindle for 5 days starting Monday. So those of y'all that have an Amazon account, and if you ever read on Kindle, Mourning Dove is free. And my publisher, as many publishers do, will do this as a promotion for 5 days because in the case of Mourning Dove, it's been in the world for 18 months, a little bit more. And I have Little T newly released. And so the idea being everybody that has not yet read Mourning Dove, let me do this as a promotion, as an incentive, because we suspect the next thing you're going to do is read Little T by Clair Fullerton. That's what the publisher's thinking. And I just found that out again yesterday, and I wanted to share that with y'all because, it's free. So, but yeah, getting back to the trip to Charlottesville, that drive, and there's something fun about a road trip. And I had Millie and Finley when Finley was a student at the University of Virginia. He invited his sister. One December, he was home for Christmas in Memphis, and he was going to drive back to Charlottesville to UVA. And he says, Millie, do you want to come to Charlottesville? And so you have these two characters driving from Memphis, and just all the sights that you see on the way from Memphis to Charlottesville. And I had them stop at a diner, and there's something that happens at that diner. The diner is right outside of Knoxville. And it just gave me, if you can put two characters in a car and put them on a road trip, there are a lot of options on what can happen, and also what can happen in the conversation. But I did describe Charlottesville, Virginia, and the campus of the University of Virginia. They lovingly call it Thomas Jefferson's stomping ground. They're very proud of the origins of the University of Virginia, and it is a breathtaking, historically preserved campus. And so, yeah, I wrote about that as well, because as Millie and Finley came of age and matured, having come from the north to Memphis, and then they're essentially raised there. They grow up there. They fit into the Southern culture, and now they have an idea of what is this strange, different world we know as the South, because we're Yankees. And what is this? What's going on down here? And they mature, and now we've got Finley going off to college. And what happens is, in Millie's life, when her brother is no longer around? You know, what developments occur in her life? And so it's all in there in the book of Mourning Dove. It was meant to be, you know, an experience. And with experiences, oftentimes journeys are attendant to experience, you know, and so yeah, that's what Emily was talking about in terms of that trip that the brother and sister took by car, you know, and just how beautiful that drive is. And yeah, then I got to really describe and explore Charlottesville, Virginia, the environs, you know, the rolling hills and you know how people live out on a lot of land in Albemarle County is what it is, and you know Skyline Drive and all of that. It is breathtaking. But I think as a writer, when you're talking about settings, you know, you're also describing how the characters use those settings. You know, how do they take advantage of the fact that, you know, they're in the woods? You know, what do they see? What do they do? What are they talking about? I mean, I love all of that. And as a writer, if I'm going to put two characters in a setting, I want the reader to be able to feel it and to see it, you know, just the nuances, you know, from like a sweeping vista of what every setting is, even if it's in somebody's kitchen. You know, I want to describe where on the counter the coffee maker is. You know, so when somebody bellies up to the counter to get a cup of coffee, what's it look like? You know, what are they navigating around in order to get to that coffee machine? So yeah, when Emily says that I'm I'm descriptive, I started thinking about this recently. I think that I'm a visual writer, that I can see the setting of scenes, and so therefore I really want to describe them so that the reader in their imagination can feel as if they're there. You know, it's all a very mysterious process, you know, this business of writing a novel, you know, because you know the ebbs and the flows and the description versus the dialogue. And you don't want too much description, so to the point where it outweighs the dialogue, and you don't want to tell the reader what's happening. You want the reader to hear it through the character's dialogue, you know. And it's, you know, writing a novel for me is an awareness that I've got like about 7 balls up in the air at the same time, and I'm focusing on one and then the next and then the next, and I want to make sure that it's all in there in terms of you know, the 5 senses. It needs to be a sensual experience as well, and then I want the reader to feel as if they're dropping in, you know, they're listening in, a fly in the wall, to what it is that's going on in a scene. You know, and reading a book is, you know, for me, it's just such a rewarding experience that, and you can't say that about going to a movie, because a movie gives you everything. You know, this is it, this is where it happened, how it happened. But when you read a book, it is such an individual experience, because I think that all of us are filtering that, you know, what we're reading, we're filtering it through what we know. So we're filtering it through our own frame of reference. And that's why you can have 3 people read the same book and take away 3 different, you know, messages from it. It's for that very reason, you know. And you know that I love reading. I read all the time, you know, and you know that's why I love libraries. Is, you know, all right, these are my people here. We all speak the same language, and there's a love of reading and a love of language and a love of story and all of that. Any other questions?
Yes,
I'm Elnora. Hello, Claire. Thank you
Hello.
so much for your book. Just a quick question. You help us so much to appreciate the culture of Memphis. Thank you for that. Back in the 70s and probably even now that you mentioned. What I wanted to ask you is, what do you think, so that we can appreciate it even more, is the difference between growing up in the formative years in, say, Memphis or Minnesota and the West Coast? What are the differences there culturally?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I will just, try to articulate my first impression. I think that, if you talk about Minnesota, they are land people to a large degree in terms of outdoors people. There's the lakes. Minnesota is the land of 10,000 lakes. And Lake Minnetonka, for instance, is outside of Minneapolis, about 15 minutes, if it's that, to get there to Lake Minnetonka. And everybody that lives in the area owns a boat, and it snows there, and it's cold for 5, 6 months out of the year, and the sky is gray, and they ski, and they get on the ice with their skadoodles or whatever you call them, and they ice fish. And so it's an entire way of utilizing the land and the weather there. And I found that when you go to the South, it is more family oriented. The families have been there, certainly the Memphis that I knew. The families were tied to the land, usually because it was inherited land passed down in families, and sometimes, the houses that went along with it. And I marveled at how many people I knew in Memphis that had ties to the state of Mississippi. And so many of them had family that somehow came from Mississippi. And you think about the history of Memphis, well, Memphis was the big city. If you're in the 30s and the 40s and then some. And so when my age group was growing up, there was still, the residue of that relationship of being tied to the state of Mississippi, because it's not that far, for one thing. It's 20 minutes outside of Memphis and you're in Mississippi. And so as a culture, you find, therefore, that those families retain their stories. Southerners are proud people about their people, about where they came from, what they did, what their accomplishments were. And I think that the South is miraculously family oriented and family proud. And with that goes the necessity to tell the story. And that's part and parcel to why Southerners as a culture have the reputation of being the best storytellers anywhere. And they call the South and other parts of the country the last romantic place in America. And it is, because I couldn't agree with that more, because there is a beauty and a softness and a romance to the rich, complicated, historic culture that area of the country has. And in the West Coast, I've found, and I've been here more than 20 years, that they raise them differently out here. My friends and that had their children, they're coming up. They're different in terms of they don't have the softness really, and it's almost like a natural poise and refinement that Southerners have, irrespective of who you are or what strata you come from. The South teaches its own about a certain type of dignity, of comportment, and refinement. And I don't see it out here in California. I'm just going to tell y'all that is my perception. And I wouldn't say that to anybody that I know out here, because it would sound harsher than I intend it to be. It's only an observation. It's not a judgment. But I have found that, and I'm in my 50s, y'all, and And I have found that even now, I think of my friends and how they're raising their children in Memphis versus my friends out here and how they're raising their children as well. And my friends down south, I come down there and visit, and they call me yes, ma'am. And I think, for the love of God, am I that old? And the answer is yes, you're that old. You really are that old. But they don't do that out here. And down there, the manners, the young men, will let a woman walk through the door before they do. They'll hold the door for them. You don't see that out here. There are a lot of things with regard to a tip of the hat to differences between males and females. The South retains that. Out here, I don't see it. And so again, not a judgment, just an observation. And so I think that different parts of the country have
I don't know.
have traditions.
I ain't got no pictures. Hold on. You just got me. I'll talk about my pictures.
Did your picture go?
Hey, Ms. Fullerton.
Yes.
I want to ask a question. Now, you said that your book will be free this coming Monday on Amazon.
Yes, ma'am.
For the people that got Kindle. I don't have a Kindle, but I have a Nook.
Yeah, that's Barnes and Noble.
Right.
So Barnes and
Noble, your books with Barnes and Noble?
Yeah, it's not on ebook. You can get the book in paperback via Barnes and Noble, but the book Mourning Dove on ebook is only on Amazon, and it's on Amazon any way you want to get it. But the idea being for those that read Kindle Unlimited, you can subscribe to Kindle Unlimited and get as many ebooks as you want per month, for one price.
Okay.
Or you can get the ebook individually on Amazon. Yeah, and that's just the way my publishing house is set up. Many in this day and age are set up the same way.
Okay, now another question I had, I'm gonna give somebody else a chance to ask.
Okay.
Since we having to wear masks everywhere we go, and as far as advertising, a lot of companies are putting their logo on their masks, for people, for them to wear, other people to wear. Have you thought about that for your books, to put on masks, the titles of your books on masks for your?
I have not, and I mean, has it come to this? I am just hoping this all goes away any day. I mean, I've noticed the answer to that is no. I'm wearing a solid color mask and I am keeping a low profile. And I'm not going anywhere unless I have to. And I haven't worn lipstick in a month of Sundays, and I can't believe it. And I mean, the whole thing for me is just so strange. But no, I mean, that would be, I'd have to get out of denial that this whole lockdown thing is real. I mean, and I'm lucky because I don't have as a writer, I'm a self-perpetuating machine. I am my own boss, and I do it from home. I mean, I have my own room, and my cat's in my room with me. She loves it, and I'm quite used to the way I've been living for a lot of years. So for me, it hasn't been a huge problem, but I just, when I have to leave the house to go somewhere, it's such a hassle. Where's my mask? Where's my sanitizer? I mean, the whole thing for me is just disorienting still. And I think the last thing I'm going to do is advertise on my mouth, put it on my face, advertising. I don't think so. I don't see that happening, but it's a good question.
Anyone else have any more questions?
Yes, Claire.
Yes.
I want to thank you so much for coming for a second time to help our little book club out. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And congratulations on all the awards. The book brings back so many memories for me. I moved to Memphis in September 1972 from a Kansas City suburb.
Perfect.
So I'm very interested to know more about what you write about uh, for Memphis in the 1970s. Please tell us some um, more about other characters in Memphis that you use in the book.
Well, in terms of Eddie Dean, for instance, I had to create him because Mourning Dove, this story was going on in the Crossan family from the vantage point of Millie, who's talking about growing up with her incredibly dynamic, brother Finley, who she thinks hung the moon, and lots of us as siblings can look back and say, oh, I hero worship my brother, or I hero worship my older sister. They were the ones with all the answers. And so, to have Mourning Dove going on from Millie's perspective, where she's telling the story, this is what it was like, this is where it was, this is who's around, this is the dynamic of the family. I needed an outsider, and to be the voice of reason. So the voice of reason for the reader, in other words, okay, you've got this family, this little nucleus, and in all of our stories, our personal stories in life, our families are quite normal. It's the rare person who says, even in hindsight, you know what, my family was nuts. When you're in it and when you're growing up, it's your idea of normal. So I needed somebody from the outside, and I created Eddie Dean as Finley's really good friend from the other side of the tracks. And when I named him Eddie Dean, of course, I was kind of thinking of a James Dean-esque character, somebody who with swagger and cool and kind of sarcastic, that could bust the family on the fact that Posey wanted Millie to make her debut at the Memphis Country Club. I needed some character to say, are you all insane? Why are you doing this? Because I was thinking the reader wants to know, why is this important? So I had to have Eddie Dean and his sarcasm, and he's always got one eyebrow raised over the dynamic that goes on in the family anyway, because he comes from the other side of the track. These kinds of things aren't important in Eddie Dean's world. And so that's one of the characters that I wanted to have in Mourning Dove. I also wanted to develop, repetitious characters like Julian Enzo, who is an artist. Artists are sensitive people. Artists are insightful people. Those who paint see the world deeply. They see it visually. They also see it accurately and deeply. And that was the reason why I put Julian Enzo in the story, to have him be also a commentator on what was going on in the region and what was going on, as a friend of the family, and so you think as a writer, when you're depicting a story, you're also depicting an era and the setting within that time frame or that era, and what things that stand out that are emblematic of that era. And by emblematic, I mean also sort of representative of what it is that people would gravitate towards, what locations, and for what purposes, And so again, I talk about, as a writer, it's like having 7 balls in the air, and certainly the characters that are outside of the nucleus of the family, they had the luxury of experiencing what's going on in the story from an elevated view. They can be objective. and they can be the voice of reason. And I wanted to touch on different sides of that strata of Memphis's culture. And by strata, I mean, and and I described it this way in the book description of Mourning Dove. If you look anywhere for the description of Mourning Dove, I always say that it was set on the genteel side of the South, so that people wouldn't think that they were in for another Southern set book where they're talking about life on the farm. That side of the South. Plenty of writers go there and set their stories there. I am not one of them, and that's what makes Mourning Dove what it is that I'm talking about something very specific that you're either born into it and know about it, or you don't. And that's why it was interesting to me to have that part of Memphis as the backdrop, and that it almost explains why the story happened as it did. So does that answer your question?
Yes, very good answer. That's very helpful, Claire. Thanks again for coming.
Well, it's so fun to see. I'm just so grateful, because I still call Memphis my home. I mean,
Right.
I still have the accent, and people out here will say, within 5 minutes of meeting me, where are you from? Where in the South are you from?
Yes.
And I still have the accent, and it would have gone away by now, So, yeah, and I'm very proud to say that I'm from Memphis. So to be with the Memphis Library, it just absolutely means the world to me, y'all. I mean, this to me is like, yeah, this is what I want to do here, because this is who I was writing about. I mean, I know that people in Memphis understand what it is I'm talking about, so it's refreshing for me. And I've had readers in different parts of the country say, that they had no idea that kind of thing. I had, and they, readers leave reviews on Goodreads, and it's a godsend to an author when a reader will rate and review, even if they say 3 sentences. It is a godsend to an author because it helps to get the word around to other readers. The more reviews, the better. It's the same way on Amazon. The more reviews, the better. But some of the reviews have been, this is the most incredibly far-fetched book, and I'm laughing because I'm like, oh no, it didn't. That was the Memphis that I knew and loved. And that was, the Memphis that I thought was well worth setting a story in. If you can talk about the family, almost touch upon the idea of the sins of the father in terms of that age-old premise that writers have always loved of cause and effect. What goes on in a family? How does it impact the generations? Because those people have children, and what are their children inheriting? I have always liked the idea of the Southern family saga, because I'm a big believer in that generational impact of what you inherit, that ends up being part and parcel to who you are, that we can all look at our families and say, well, the reason I am who I am is because of where I came from. So one's foundation in life explains so much of who they are, and it answers the question of the choices that are made in a lifetime, for the good, the bad, or the indifferent. I think so much can be traced back to the source of the family. And so, therefore, I mean, if you look at therapists, their whole thrust is in trying to get everybody to understand the impact of their family. That's the first place they go. Tell me about your family, And so this is why, for me, as a writer, I am fascinated in that. I did it in Mourning Dove. I did it again in Little T. And in that novella that was mentioned, I was asked by a publisher if I would contribute to a book called Southern Season. And they wanted 4 writers who were from the South to write a novella, which means 20,000 words. It translates to about 50 pages. They wanted a story. Here's the guidelines. Set it in the South during one of the 4 seasons. And I said, let me take the fall. And they said, great. And then I thought, I have no idea what I'm going to write. I've never written a novella, but I can tell a Southern story. And I was on the phone with somebody who's in his 80s, and he was a contemporary of my mother who was no longer with us, God rest her. And he was telling me about somebody who had died in Memphis, and they were all going to Canale Funeral Home. And they were all gonna after that and after that and after that. And he said, the one thing I know about a Southern funeral is something always goes wrong. And I started laughing so hard when I heard that line, and I wrote it down, and I said, I think I've got the premise of my novella that I'm gonna write for the book of Southern Season. And I said it at a Memphis funeral for 3 days, a 3-day whatever. And again, I started talking about the family because it was the narrator's mother who died. And I had her rushing from across the United States to get to Memphis. And she's bringing her husband, who had never spent time in the South before, with her. And what that 3-day funeral was like, and who was there, and what they were doing, and what they were saying. And again, I started writing about the Southern culture and the family again. And, I keep thinking, this is just the subject that I will never, ever tire of in terms of, who we are. Who are we as people? We are where we come from, the culture, and who was around us, and the traditions, and the beliefs. Everything from the church you went to the school you went to just the rhythm year in and year out of how you lived your life. I mean, that's who we are. And that's where the story is. And that's what I don't think I'm ever going to tire of exploring that subject. And again, the South being the last romantic place on earth, and Memphis being what I know as a frame of reference of the South, I don't see any reason for me to stop writing about it anytime soon.
Claire,
Yeah.
William, one of the listeners, William is asking this question. Having listened to the audiobook and enjoyed hearing your character voices, would you please read a scene from the book with dialogue from the kitchen? Posey, Ella, and Millie.
Okay. I'm going to have to find the page, but y'all, I had a blast doing that audiobook because my husband, I told you, he's a sound guy, and he has a recording studio on our property. And he and I went out back and recorded it. It took a couple of weeks to do it, but my husband's from Chicago. I had him laughing so hard while we were doing it. It was so much fun. And so I can't tell you how pleased I am that somebody, listened to the audiobook. Let me see. I have to find it. There's a sample of it on my website of the Mourning Dove audiobook. ClairFullerton.com has a sample of me reading from the book. I would have to be prepared for that. I can't find a scene unless do you have the book there, William?
He said no. So while you're looking, Claire, I just want to make a comment. I I myself is a transplant to the South. So when I first came to the South, I bought a book called Southern Belle. And in the book, what I learned is that when you want to come to the South, you want to be a Southern Belle, you need to have a iced tea pitcher and devil egg platter. So I bought both of them. But I wish I read your book at that time. That would be so helpful. What I said is that for I compare your book to Amy Tan's Joy Luck Club if you want to learn about Chinese culture. So if you want to learn about South, this is the book. I wish I read it 20 years ago.
Okay, I have something here. That's great. And I'm the only one who hasn't read Amy Tan yet. I am well aware that that book swept the planet. And I will read it because I want to read about Chinese culture. And then we'll discuss. All right, so here we go. Ida Ella Morgan let herself in through the back door every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. She'd leave her purse and then change out of her street shoes in the walk-in cupboard off the butler's pantry. She'd be well into her day before any of us got up. She adhered to a schedule that was a mystery to me, but I always knew I could find her in the kitchen first thing in the morning and last thing in the afternoon before she'd take the key to Kensington Park's back gate and stand out on Poplar, where the 4 o'clock bus took her home to the shanty side of Memphis. A Black woman in her early 60s who hailed from Tunica, Mississippi, Ella was strong-boned and square-faced with penetrating brown eyes and an imperious nature. She commandeered our house and anchored it with a dignity so implacable she never resorted to superfluous words. Solid, proud, and streetwise, Ella compensated for her illiteracy by being the best cook in town. When she wasn't engaged in the finer points of running the house, she could be found assembling her infamous lemon meringue pie, oftentimes at the request of one of Mom's friends. I walked into the kitchen and found Ella grating lemon. "Who's that for?" I said by way of good morning. "Miss Wilburn mother done passed," Ella said. "Miss Posey gonna carry it over there this afternoon, and then she'll be back directly. She having a dinner party tonight." I rifled through the refrigerator looking for butter, then pulled open the drawer directly in front of Ella to find a knife before I put the bread in the toaster. I was in the habit of sparring with Ella and moved my elbow to her side in jest. "You're in my way," I said. Without taking a breath, Ella stood back and eyed me tip to toe. "Skinny old you? You ain't got no way," she dismissed. Just then, my mother entered the kitchen. Ella turned and met her eyes. "You fixing to go?" "I'm off to the beauty parlor. I'll be back around 1 for the pie. Thank you, Ella." Mom snapped the purse that matched her yellow sundress and turned toward the door. "Anything I need to pick up while I'm out?" "No, ma'am, we got it all here," Ella said. "Millie, if you and Finley could clean up your records in the card room, it'd be a big help." "Okay," I said. "And be sure to take Inky and Ike out," she continued. "I will, I promise." "All right, then. I'll see y'all later," Mom said, turning to go. Whenever I didn't have much to do, I'd hang around and watch Ella. I followed her back to the butler's pantry and sat in the counter beneath the window that housed the double porcelain sinks, watching her polish silver as she did every Friday. It was a big job, and I helped her bring the sterling silver in from the dining room, then watched her scrub it down with Wright's polish and a toothbrush before she had submerged it in sudsy waters shot through with lemon and ammonia. "Run, fetch me the silver service on the sideboard," Ella said. Her rough, wrinkled arms elbow deep in the metallic gray water. "Bring it to me piece by piece. Miss Posey having 12 tonight," she said, as Rosa May came through the back door from the guest house. I don't know why, but Ella and Rosa May didn't cotton to each other. I knew because Ella never once called Rosa May by her proper name, even though they worked in tandem every time anything of significance happened at 79 Kensington Park. They shared duties each time Mom threw a dinner party, while Rosa May's 16-year-old daughter sat up back in the guest house and tended to the dwindling Gaga, something that didn't take much more time than sitting there. Anyway, so that's part of, will that do it, William?
Yes, he said yes.
Okay.
Okay, any more questions from our audience? I guess we've asked all the questions, but thank you so much, Claire. This has been fantastic. It's
Thank
just
you,
been
Claire.
wonderful.
Yeah, and so what a pleasure from the bottom of my heart. I thank each and every one of you for coming today. And I love Memphis and I love the library. And I hope to see you all again in the future. I'm going to stay in touch, let you know what I've been doing. But do tell your friends that Morning Dove will be free for 5 days starting Monday. You know, those that have the Kindle thing. And there's nothing like getting a free book.
Absolutely. We'll put this information maybe on our Explore Memphis website or somewhere. So at least I'll send this email out to our
Okay.
book club people so people can take advantage of this.
Very, very good. Well, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Y'all have fun. Have a good day.
Well, thank you all.
You too.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you,
Thank you,
Claire.
everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Goodbye.
Bye.
Okay, thank you.